Welcome to the debate. Today, our discussion is really rooted in the strategies that Latif lays out for contractors and roofers, specifically those looking to secure better supplements. And we're not talking about the initial submission. We're focused on that critical phase after the first supplement package has already been sent in. This is where it all happens, right? This is where contractors either successfully add thousands in legitimate revenue or they just fail to get compensated for necessary code-compliant work.
That's exactly right. That moment, when the package is on the desk and you get that first pushback from the adjuster, that's the real test. I mean, for a contractor who's really focused on increasing their profits, handling this phase the right way can mean, 5 figures or more in justifiable revenue every single year. It's one of the most important stages in the whole process.
Absolutely. So I think the real question for us, the one we really need to dig into is this. What's the most reliable path to getting supplements approved consistently? Is it all about cultivating a collaborative teamwork mentality and using sort of soft negotiation tactics with the desk adjuster?
Or is it about maintaining a firm, uncompromising stance that is anchored exclusively in objective, legally binding documentation?
I see why you'd frame it that way, but let me offer a different perspective. I'm going to argue that adopting that teamwork mentality, just as Latif puts it, is really the crucial piece for navigating a desk adjuster's workflow and getting fast, friction-free approval.
And I'll be arguing that while, sure, courtesy is a given, rigorous and objective documentation, we're talking specific codes, verifiable specs, that has to take precedence over trying to build rapport. Because at the end of the day, evidence is the only sustainable strategy. It's the only thing that works without relying on an adjuster's, subjective goodwill on any given day.
Well, the supplement process, when you really boil it down, is about psychology and efficiency, especially in today's high-volume claims world. Desk adjusters are not our enemies. Their internal metrics, they're focused on accuracy, but they're just as focused on speed. They want to close claims and move them off their desk. So the winning strategy has to be making approval the path of least resistance for them. And you do that by fostering professional rapport and adopting that teamwork mindset. When we approach an adjuster collaboratively, we're not framing it as a fight over money. We're framing it as, hey, we're working together to properly document this claim. If we present the information in a standardized way, correct Xactimate codes, super organized files, clear communication, we're just streamlining their verification process. We're essentially giving them the pre-packaged story they need to justify the payout to their own supervisor. And that transforms confrontation into collaborative problem solving. It's all about asking questions like, how can we solve this documentation gap together?
That's a compelling argument. It is. But I would frame that hierarchy just a little bit differently. Look, professional courtesy is absolutely essential. You can't be rude, you can't be aggressive. But relying on subjective rapport, well, that creates a massive systemic risk when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue every year. Supplements succeed because they are built on documented, verifiable facts. The documentation is your ultimate shield. It has to be strong enough that it could withstand a supervisor's audit, even if the adjuster who approved it is long gone. If you're missing the hard evidence, the detailed photos, the accurate measurements, the non-negotiable code citations, well, no amount of collaboration is going to get you approval because the adjuster simply can't justify it internally. The real ammunition here is legal compliance. When we cite federal OSHA regulations or specific IRC sections, that cost becomes mandatory.
For example, citing IRC 905.2.71, which outlines the requirement for ice and water shield. An adjuster just can't override that no matter how much they might like you. The structure of the claim has to be objectively sound before rapport can even begin to speed things up.
I agree that a sound structure is the foundation. It's the price of entry, absolutely. But the way we handle that negotiation threshold, that determines if the process is fast and productive or just slow and painful. Let's take one of the most fiercely contested items, project manager supervision. A lot of contractors track that with the Xactimate code LABSUPER.
Oh, that's a perfect example. It really tests that teamwork boundary sharply. Because lab super, that supplemental labor for project management, is so often resisted. Adjusters love to say, oh, that's already included in the base labor rates. But this is a non-negotiable federal compliance issue. It's mandated by OSHA 1926.502H, and that section requires a competent person for steep slope work, which is defined as 712 pitch or greater. A general foreman is just not the same thing as a competent safety person focused on fall protection. So if you let the adjuster talk you into compromising on the rate, or worse, just omitting the line item for the sake of rapport, you're compromising the safety compliance of the whole job, and you're leaving yourself legally exposed. The firmness of your documentation has to come before the desire to be agreeable. If you don't fight for that specific citation, you lose.
I'm not convinced, because I think you're misidentifying the approach here. You're confusing firmness with confrontation. Being firm, based on that legal citation, is 100% necessary. But collaboration lets the contractor redocument instead of just outright fighting the denial. Instead of just citing the code and making a demand, the effective technique, and this is what we see in the successful case studies, is to acknowledge the adjuster's internal pressure, present the code, and then immediately pivot to a collaborative question. You say something like, look, I understand why you're cautious about the labor rates, but given that OSHA Regulation 1926.502H makes competent supervision mandatory on this 812 pitch roof, what specific supporting documents or language can I provide using Xactimate line items that will let you approve this as a code-required safety cost, instead of just seeing it as an optional markup?
Okay, I'll admit, that is a highly skilled application of the principle. But the effectiveness of that question hinges entirely on the fact that you first provided the verifiable, uncompromising documentation. If that OSHA citation and the pitch measurement were missing, the adjuster would just dismiss the question and deny the item based on standard procedure. The reliance has to be on the specific, objective legal requirement. If your documentation is weak, rapport gives you zero legal cover.
But that still misses the crucial step. So many contractors submit the code citation and then just stop. They wait for approval. The collaborative approach recognizes that the desk adjuster often can't just override a system flag without a specific reason. The power of that question is that it gives the adjuster the intellectual permission to process the cost. It turns their no into help me justify this. And that right there is the essence of the efficiency that Latif talks about. It avoids that endless back and forth.
I'd counter that the back and forth is reduced most effectively by making sure the initial documentation is so complete that it preempts most of those questions in the first place. And when we shift our focus from something like project manager supervision to the operational side of things, say contention 2, follow-up, and momentum, the differences in our approaches get even clearer.
I agree. Momentum is where that teamwork mentality really shines. I mean, even with perfect documentation, a supplement will just sit there and stall if the contractor is disorganized or doesn't track it. Our system stresses the 24-hour rule for follow-up acknowledgement, and it requires a rigorous spreadsheet tracking system. You have to manage the status, set the next follow-up dates. This makes sure the supplement stays on the adjuster's radar, which is a clear act of collaboration that respects their incredibly busy workflow.
I see the need for organization. I do. But I am very cautious about that 24-hour rule if it's just applied blindly. You know, excessive or poorly timed follow-up can easily trigger the annoying red flag, especially if that initial package was sloppy. Imagine calling at 4:57 p.m. on a Friday. No amount of organization gets that claim process before Monday, and you might actually damage the professional relationship. For me, the most crucial timing element isn't how fast you follow up, it's the timing of your subsequent submissions. For hidden damage, if you're submitting a second supplement for unforeseen damage, like, say, discovering extensive unnailable decking during the tear-off, that has to be documented and submitted during the work.
And why is that timing so crucial from your documentation standpoint?
Because if you wait until weeks after the job is done, it doesn't matter how great your tracking spreadsheet is. You've triggered the timing red flag. The discovery narrative is gone. It just looks like an opportunistic afterthought, not a genuine discovery of damage that was legitimately hidden. Credibility, which you get through real-time, accurate submission backed by photos taken mid-tear-off, that outweighs the urgency of a follow-up call. The professionalism of the submission protects your claims far better than simple persistence.
Immediate decision. It's about acknowledging receipt and setting the expectation for the next communication. It shows the adjuster, look, we're organized, we know you're busy, but we are professionally tracking this and we'll be ready when you are. It just keeps the supplement from falling off their mental calendar. It's about helping manage their workload and ensuring your claim has a higher priority than the file from the less organized contractor.
Priority has to be earned through evidence, not just persistence. And this brings us right to contention 3. How we manage the overall scope and the precision of our documentation to avoid sliding into those ethical gray areas.
We completely agree that maximizing legitimate claim value depends on ethical rigor. We only bill for legitimate work performed, period. But my collaborative view extends to ensuring a comprehensive scope for the homeowner, which means documenting all verifiable damage, not just the roofing components.
Okay, but why does the contractor need to take on the complexity of documenting damage that's outside their trade? My concern is that maintaining that rigor requires the contractor to stick to precise, policy-proof language to defend their core items. For example, when you're documenting the replacement of structural components, you have to use a term like unavailable surface instead of rot, because policy often excludes rot from lack of maintenance. Unavailable surface frames the issue as a structural failure that must be addressed for code compliance for the IRC nailing pattern standards. If you use the softer, less precise term just to have an easier conversation, you could inadvertently give the adjuster grounds for a policy exclusion. The documentation has to be legally airtight.
The rigorous, precise documentation is, as I've said, the price of entry. But the comprehensive scope strategy, that's the collaborative act that generates the most value for the claim and for the client. By including documentation for all the legitimate damage, damaged gutters, AC comb damage, fence sections, detached structures, everything, we help the homeowner receive the full actual cash value, the ACV portion of that claim up front.
But explain the mechanic there. How does documenting a damaged fence help the roofer secure their legitimate roofing supplement?
It's strategic leverage. That ACV money that's released for the ancillary damage, which can be substantial sometimes, it goes directly to the homeowner. They can then use that money to cover or offset their deductible. This protects both the client and the contractor. When the homeowner's out-of-pocket cost is reduced, they're far less likely to try and cut corners on the roof, which means the contractor's legitimate costs, like overhead and profit, are secure. It makes the entire job financially viable for the client, and that smooths the way for your primary roofing supplement. It even builds trust with the adjuster because you're showing them the full, honest scope of the loss.
That is a persuasive application of the comprehensive scope, I will grant you that. It really does demonstrate a collaborative benefit. But I have to circle back to the core limitation here. You can only successfully document those ancillary items if you stick to those strict verifiable standards. The moment you introduce an item that can't be defended with clear, policy-proof photos or specific code citations, if you slip back into using imprecise terms, you jeopardize the credibility of the entire supplement package, including the roofing items that are absolutely necessary. The foundation is still the evidence.
And that's where the sophisticated understanding of Latif's principles really lies, in the balance. While rigorous documentation is the ticket to play the game, it's the absolute minimum requirement. Relationship management and clear communication, those are the accelerants. The most successful contractors are the ones who combine the absolute confidence in their legal and technical documentation with the courtesy of making the desk adjuster's job easy. They ensure the claim gets processed quickly and with minimal internal friction.
I agree that the results are transformative, and they show contractors how to dramatically increase their legitimate revenue. However, I still maintain that the foundation of maximizing that value is rooted in objective evidence that can stand up to the most intense scrutiny. Respectful disagreement, grounded in specific code citations, like those for fire class rating requirements or material compatibility, which are legally unavoidable. That's what ensures the contractor gets fair and full compensation. You don't have to rely on the subjective goodwill of an overwhelmed adjuster who might transfer the file tomorrow.
Both perspectives really offer powerful, complementary tools for maximizing legitimate revenue in this critical post-submission phase. I think the challenge for the contractor listening is finding the right balance, combining that firm, unassailable evidence with professional, strategic collaboration on every single claim to keep things moving and the revenue flowing.
Indeed.
This discussion, detailing how contractors can increase their profits by applying these principles, is part of a series covering the system laid out by Latif. Be sure to tune in to the next chapter for more specialized insights on leveraging these strategies to further build your business.